Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us. So we will get started. It is 1 o'clock. I will first ask Ms. Fawcett if she could introduce everyone, committee staff, and let us know if there are any regrets. I believe that we do have 2 regrets today, and otherwise we have all of our members here. So yeah, if you don't mind sharing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, welcome everyone to this afternoon's meeting. I can confirm that we do have quorum, and we are currently missing from committee members, Ms. Everett and Ms. Smith, who were unable to join us this afternoon. Joining us from staff are Joanne Boris, Housing Program Administrator, John Henderson, Housing Program Administrator, and Nicola Reed, Housing Program Administrator. I myself am Elizabeth Fawcett, and I am the committee clerk. And Blair Johnson is also joining us as host for this afternoon. We currently have 2 members of the public joining us, Madam Chair, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we will call this meeting to order. And again, thank you everybody for being with us. And thank you also to those members of the public who are with us as well. So we'll start with the approval of the agenda. Was there any discussion for the agenda? All looks good. All right, I think I saw Councillor Neal's hand go up as a first for that motion. Thank you. And if I could have a second. Thank you. Thank you. We had 3 there. I think Ms. McCarty, I saw your hand first. And if I could have a show of hands for all in favor for the approval. Thank you so much. So that passes with all of us. Confirmation of minutes is next. Is there any discussion from members of the committee before a vote on the confirmation of minutes? And you'll notice that there are 2 minutes. So the first is from December 9th, and then the next was from the special meeting on February 9th. So if there is no discussion, I will ask for a first for the motion to accept both of the committee meeting minutes. Thank you, Councillor Doherty, and thank you, Mr. Clark. So we had a first in Councillor Doherty, a second in Mr. Clark, and if I could see a show of hands for all in favor. Thank you so much. Again, passes unanimously. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. There's none. Perfect. So delegations is next on the agenda. There are no registered delegations. And next is briefings, and there are no briefings. Now we will move over to our business item of the day. And I will, just before we get to it, I will note that following the business item, I will call on any of our committee members who wish to ask a question or make a comment. Following that, I know that there are 2 members of the public currently present. More may join us. And any member of the public who would like to speak will have up to 5 minutes, be able to ask all of their questions, and the answers to those questions will be at the end of the public questions comment section of the business item. And please note that questions and comments are to relate to the business item on the agenda. So we will get started. So the business item today is the quarterly standing update. It is for information purposes only. There isn't any motion attached to it or any vote needed. So we will get started with that, and I will turn it over to Joanne Boris. I know Joanne will give us a brief introduction, and I believe we also have Nicola Reed and John Henderson present to help with anything extra and certainly any questions. So,
good afternoon, and thank you so much, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you for joining us today and for allowing me to go through our quarterly update around the programs associated with the Housing and Social Services Department. So I'm going to specifically speak to the homeless services and provide you with an update as we go to some of the major areas that we're currently working on. I know a lot of this will not be new to you, but maybe some of the updates themselves will be. So we'll begin with the Homelessness Collective. I know that we've had an opportunity to discuss this with this group and committee previously, but the Homelessness Advisory Committee is really made up or the Homelessness Collective, excuse me, is made up of a number of frontline service providers that provide direct service to the clients in the community. It's made up of other funding sources and partners, such as the United Way. We have healthcare partners at that table also. And we meet bi-weekly with an attempt to ensure that we're providing a real people-focused and centered approach to dealing with some of the more difficult challenges that we're working through as service providers, as funders, sort of in each of our own respective fields, but really with that collective lens to ensuring that we're doing the best work possible for the individuals that we serve. So as we meet bi-weekly, what we've been able to do over the last couple of months is come up with a few target areas to begin some dedicated work towards. We've identified 4 main region areas right now. The first being discharge planning. And by discharge planning, we mean when individuals might be leaving either corrections or a hospital or care type of setting, we want to ensure that we're working with those partners for a collaborative and seamless approach to individuals accessing the homelessness system. So if they're leaving a corrections facility, a hospital, and don't have somewhere to go that is their own home, we want to make sure that those connections are made early and that they're the right connections so that there's as little disruption for that client as possible. So there's a group working towards ensuring that that is in place and that we work to mitigate any current challenges we have with the current system. There is another group who is currently looking at staff shortages. I'm sure it's no surprise that you've heard that some of our service providers, especially after the last 2 years of COVID and the amount of work that they've gone through, have been experiencing some significant staffing shortages. It's been difficult to recruit individuals into this field. And so what we want to do as a collective is understand the nature of the work being done by our incredible service providers and those who work directly with the clients in our community, and how to best support them, not just in hiring, but in maintaining their staff and ensuring that their staff are enjoying this work and feeling dedicated and supported in doing this incredible work. We were also having a group working on the extension of the warming center. The current warming center was in place until April 1st, but I'm sure as you've been made aware at other tables or through other discussions, we've been looking at ways to make that service available for another 3 months because we know that the need is still in the community. Unfortunately, our shelter and emergency shelter systems have not been able to get back up to full capacity yet with respect to COVID still being a challenge for some of the individuals that we serve. We're not entirely sure when we're going to be able to start ramping those services back up. So the 19 beds and the supports that the warming center are providing to our most vulnerable in the community are desperately needed. And so there is a group that is working towards ensuring that that programming continues, potentially in a new iteration, but ensuring that clients have that support over the coming months as we look to increasing the shelter capacities. And the final focus is stigma. There is a group dedicated to working on ensuring that community members across the city, across the county, are aware of the stigma that a lot of the individuals we work with are currently dealing with, and that we work as a community to determine and develop ways to overcome that stigma so that more people are willing to come aboard and do this incredible work with us. So that is what the current Collective Homelessness Committee is working on. I know that you'll probably have time for questions afterwards, so happy to answer anything that I didn't address there. But I'm going to move on to the Integrated Care Hub. And that has been a topic of discussion for quite some time. In November, Council agreed that the city could continue to fund the Integrated Care Hub until the end of March. Behind the scenes, senior leadership has been doing some incredible advocacy work, trying to ensure that the Ministry of Health could come to the table and work to support in funding this incredible initiative. There has been no full commitment to date made yet. However, we are expecting that there should be some information from the Ministry of Health shortly, and the Integrated Care Hub and staff are currently working on contingency plans in the event that that did not occur. Services are scheduled to no longer be funded by the city at the end of this month, but again, Senior leadership is very diligently working on ensuring that they are in discussions with the Ministry of Health. Just going to, one of the pieces from the Integrated Care Hub is currently the fact that we have been undergoing a review. That was an amendment made during that November council meeting that I alluded to earlier, where a councillor wanted to understand the impact that the Integrated Care Hub was having on a number of different demographics, those being most importantly, the clients that are served at that location, the stakeholders associated with the Integrated Care Hub, so those who make referrals and who work with the clients there on a daily basis, including other service providers, the residents who live in close proximity to the Integrated Care Hub, and the businesses that are around the Integrated Care Hub also. So a consultant organization, NERC Consulting, is actually in the midst of completing that current evaluation to look at all of those different pieces. There are currently focus groups that are ongoing with senior management at the Integrated Care Hub and members of the community surrounding the Integrated Care Hub and the client base. We are looking to bring back information about that report to the March 22nd council meeting. So there should be a full access to that report and appendixes at that council meeting. Next, I'm going to talk about emergency shelter system. I did allude to the fact a little earlier that unfortunately, we have not yet been able to get up to full capacity. There have been a couple of more COVID outbreaks that have occurred both at the warming center and at from the cold and the Integrated Care Hub. We're seeing some little pop-up COVID flares through the community. And service providers are working really diligently to ensure that they are able to maintain current levels of service, which is about still half capacity, without impacting that too greatly. The emergency shelter providers in the warming center are continuing to work very, very closely with their IPAC teams at Public Health and taking their guidance and lead. We do expect that Public Health will actually have some announcements, hopefully next week, around congregate care settings. Again, we're not sure when those numbers will be able to go to full capacity or if that will ever be the case at this point in time, but we are working closely with Public Health to make the determination as to when it is safe to do so. Right now, the Kingston Youth Shelter, they were at Ridley, so they had moved to Ridley quite a few months ago to ensure that they had an ability to socially distance clients in that building location. Unfortunately, they could only stay at Ridley until the beginning of March because there is some construction work being done at that Ridley site in anticipation of transitional housing at Ridley. So the Kingston Youth Shelter was able to access a new location for a home for the Kingston Youth Shelter, which is wonderful. But as that new building and location goes through some zoning and some construction to make sure that it is up to code and in good repair for them moving in, they have moved back to their old location, which is on Brock Street. It does mean that there are less numbers right now, less youth able to access the shelter, but staff again are working really closely with those youth and offering other services and supports if they reach capacity. Interestingly, their numbers have been quite a bit lower over the last little while. They have not yet hit capacity, but we'll make sure that they keep us up to date if that does occur. And to the warming center. The warming center has been up and functional. It has been full nightly. In fact, it's gotten to the point where they were turning 1 or 2 individuals away nightly. Great reviews from clients around the care and support that they're receiving, the meal program that is being run out of that location by Lionhearts. And every night, 19 individuals have been able to access a really nice, warm, safe space. Again, we are looking at ensuring that the service is provided after March 31st and are working closely with the United Way as a funding partner to make sure those resources are there to be able to continue that great work. The homelessness system services review is the next topic that I'm going to just briefly chat about. We started this review in 2020, and we are now close to the end. There have been proposals for all of the services that we looked to procure, except a dedicated women's shelter. So the city has provided all of our current service providers with an extension of their agreements currently until June 30th of 2022 to allow us time to really ensure that the procurement process is in good order. And what we're expecting is to report back to council with recommendations for service provision in the second quarter of 2022. The last piece I'm going to talk about before passing it over to my colleague, Nicola, in social housing is the encampment working group protocol. After Bell Park, the city created an encampment protocol working group, and it's been a fantastic endeavor because it has included a number of different departments within the city, everyone from bylaw to rec and leisure to public works, housing and social services. And we have had street outreach and members of the Integrated Care Hub also on that working group. We've been monitoring the situation with the encampment issues around the city, and there was a moratorium on moving encampments while we experienced the COVID outbreaks that we were working through. The concern was that if we were moving individuals across the city, there was more chance and more risk of individuals being unwell and potentially spreading COVID across the city. So we're working again closely with IPAC and public health to make sure that we understand if and when it's safe to continue with the encampment protocol and to reintroduce the bylaws around encampments. So that is what's going on in the housing field. And I will now pass it over to Nicola Reed, who's my colleague, our housing programs advisor for social housing.
Thanks, Joanne. And through you, Madam Chair, I'll provide some updates about the social housing programs with our department. I'm first going to talk about end of mortgages, end of operating agreements, and step down funding. The city's obligation to maintain the service levels that are required through the Ministry of Housing continues at the same time as the federal funding provided to partially fund this housing is steadily decreasing. And at the same time, our housing providers' end of mortgages and end of operating agreements are expiring. So currently, housing providers are legally obligated to maintain their rent geared to income housing units beyond the operating agreements, and the city's housing staff will conduct an in-depth analysis of those providers that are impacted to determine what an agreement will look like past the end of mortgage time, including the number of rent geared to income units, as well as the subsidy to be providing according to each provider's unique set of circumstances. The subsidy funding prior to the end of mortgage included expenses with the mortgage included. Therefore, getting a higher subsidy, and it's expected that without that expense, the subsidy can be reduced. However, there are other things to consider, especially with the buildings aging, such as costly capital repair expenditures. So that is taken into consideration as well. That all being said, in July of 2020, Bill 184, Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Community Housing Act, received royal assent, and the new legislation will update the Housing Services Act, including things like processes for housing providers to exit agreements post the end of mortgages, as well as a framework for current and new housing providers to enter into new service agreements. The other thing is modernizing the service level standards to broaden the type of housing assistance that can be included instead of just the rent geared to income units. Also, as well, the current funding formula in determining the subsidy amounts may be changing as well. We don't have any of those details yet, but once these regulatory details are provided, then we'll have a much better idea of how to plan and deliver expectations when our providers' mortgages and operating agreements expire. In terms of the current amount of RGI stock, rent geared to income stock, the majority of them are with the portfolio of our local housing corporation, Kingston Frontenac Housing, and even more now with the asset transfer of Townhomes Kingston. And the local housing corporations are excluded from the end of operating agreements as they operate under a shareholder agreement. Also, as part of that planning, the city has introduced the local portable housing benefit as an alternative option for maintaining the service level standards as these operating agreements expire, while being more cost effective. And the pilot started in 2018, and at that time there were 50 portable housing benefits. It's now a permanent program, and we've increased the portable housing benefits, and another 25 were approved by council for 2022, and the total now is 113 portable housing benefits. Along that line, there is also the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit, which is another portable housing benefit that's similar to the city's local portable housing benefit. However, it's funded through the Ministry of Finance, and the benefit can be used anywhere in Ontario. The allocation of funding from the city for the city of Kingston, the planned amount beginning April 2022 is $558,500, and the target populations that we're targeting this year are victims of domestic violence and human trafficking, seniors, those with disabilities, homelessness, and Indigenous. So we've been working with the housing navigator for East and Southeast region with Extended Family Development Services Ontario to offer the application for the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit to those with developmental disabilities, as well as working with Tippy Moza to offer to the Indigenous population. So next, I'll go over some updates with the social housing registry and specifically the centralized wait list over last year, 2021. So in terms of the number of households that were eligible for rent geared to income on our wait list, at the end of 2021, December 31st, there was a total of 1,216 households, with the largest group being singles. Of those 1,216, there were 198 households who were already living in rent geared to income units, however, would like to be moved to another location. The primary source of income in 2021 for those on the wait list it's usually the same thing year by year, but approximately 45% of the applicants are in receipt of Ontario Disability supports, 15% in receipt of Ontario Works, and another 7 to 8% in receipt of CPP. Last year, there were a total number of 154 households that were actually housed in RGI units or received the portable housing benefit or the Canada-Ontario housing benefit. The average time for those who were housed last year was anywhere from 1.5 years to 8 years with the regular rent geared to income units, depending on bedroom size. 6 months to 4 years for seniors and 6 years for the portable housing benefit. So what should be noted here is that the portable housing benefit was only introduced in 2018. However, these applicants were those who had applied for regular rent geared to income units prior to adding PHB or portable housing benefit to their list of choices. The wait for those on special deemed with special priority was anywhere from 1 month to 1 year, depending on the size of unit. In the report, there is a graph that shows the history of active applicants on the wait list for the last 5 years. And what we can see is that there was a peak in December of 2019. And then it steadily fell in 2020, which is likely due to those in receipt of the federally funded temporary pandemic benefits. And we have seen a slow rise over the last year, and it seems to be continuing to rise now. So next, I will speak about the Tenant Support Services Program, which is being run as a pilot initiative through Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation, which offers supports to their tenants by providing crisis services, direct assessment and intervention services, and general ongoing supports to their tenants. So this has proven to be a well-accepted program with Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation's tenants, especially with all the challenges with COVID over the last couple of years. And then in January of 2021, the support workers were able to help the tenants from the fire, which destroyed their homes at McMullen Manor in Verona. Over 2021, they had 200 intake referrals, and support staff can continue to work with 195 households on an ongoing basis. The pilot initially was scheduled to end in December 2021, and it has been extended for another year. Lastly, I'm going to speak to the topic of seniors across the country who saw a decrease in their guaranteed income supplement. They found this out on July 28, 2021 without warning, impacting their ability to pay rent. So this was a result of pandemic benefits received in 2020 showing in their taxes, and that's how the GIS is calculated each year. So housing staff expanded eligibility requirements for the Homelessness Prevention Fund to include those who were impacted by this by providing financial assistance from August 2021 through April of 2022. MP Mark Gerritson's office has confirmed there will be a one-time grant for those seniors who were affected by this. And so on April 19th of this year, eligible seniors will receive a payment equal to the annualized reduction of their GIS allowance. So all in all, the Homelessness Prevention Fund has been able to assist 9 seniors in Kingston since August on an ongoing basis to help them supplement their rent costs. So with that, I thank you. And that's what I have to update you on with the social housing. But I'm going to forward it now to my colleague, John Henderson, to go over some updates with the affordable housing programs.
Thanks a lot, Nicole. Nicholas, sorry. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to run over the affordable housing projects and a few of the programs that we're have offering right now. In terms of affordable housing, this group probably knows, but we're talking about below market rent. So it's not rent-geared income housing. And we have about 450 of those units in the service area. So in the county of Frontenac, there's a few in the city of Kingston, of course, is the majority of the 450 units. There's a table in the report that provides a overview of the ongoing projects. So I'll just run through those quickly, but I'm certainly happy to answer any detailed questions you might have about those. 27 Wright Crescent is the first one. So there's 23 units in there that are non-market units. So 10 of those are RGI units, and the other 13 are affordable units, and there's 17 market units in that project. So that's actually just finishing up right now. We had a tour of that a couple of weeks ago, and it's a really great building. If you haven't been by Wright Crescent, have a try. It looks really great. At 1316, 1318 Princess, this is been a big project for the city. This is a property the city purchased a few years ago and has been working with the Kingston Housing Corporation and Kingston Cooperative Homes to develop affordable housing projects on that site. So there'll be a total of 90 affordable units, and it's a range of affordability within this project. And there's 10 rent-geared income units. And those 10 rent-geared income units are net new rent-geared income units. So on top of the existing 2003 service level standard. The other 80 units are a mix of 80% and 60% of average market rent units. And that project is going to be underway soon. The construction will start in the coming weeks with Kingston Housing Corporation's building, and the Kingston Co-op building further to the south. South will start later in the spring. At 484 Albert Street, this is the former Princess Street United Church that Home-Based Housing is developing 48 transitional and supportive housing units for youth. So you're probably familiar with past reports. There's about $9 million in provincial and municipal funding that's been allocated to this project. Home-Based Housing is currently now applying to CMHC to put together the rest of the capital budget to allow the project to be built in full. At 1752 Bath Road, council's approved funding for 28 affordable units. So these will be 80% affordable units. And that project is currently in the approvals process. So looking to start construction somewhere down the road. It still has the development approvals ongoing. At 113 Lower Union Street, this is a project most people know a lot about. This is the Indigenous Housing Services Center and Indigenous Housing. There's 19 beds there in a congregate living setup. And that's the renovation work is pretty much finishing up right now, and they've started to occupy those bedrooms at that property. 805 Ridley Drive. This is another property that was purchased by the city as part of the local COVID emergency housing response. It's been used for self-isolation initially, and then the Kingston Youth Shelter was there as an interim location. And they've recently moved to another interim location while the renovation is completed in the east wing of the Ridley Drive property to provide 12 independent units. And most recently, council's approved a partnership with Dawn House, who will be the operator of those units. And we're going to come back in a few months with a plan for the west wing of that property as well. Macaulay Street in Rideau Heights. This is the Shannon Park block. Habitat for Humanity has approval to develop 8 tiny house units. So council provided the land to the project as well as a capital funding commitment. So they're currently working on the development approvals for that project. There's also the Rideau Heights phase 2 piece, which is the Headway block, which is just west of the Shannon Park area. And there's a detailed overview in this report as well about what's going on there. But essentially it's revitalizing that block by introducing a new public street where the existing fire lane is, introducing private lanes to provide front door access to a lot of the townhouses that are there that are stacked in behind each other, as well as opportunity for infill housing to create new apartment units, new townhouse units, new triplexes, and townhouses. At 1 Curtis Crescent, the Kingston Housing Corporation is developing 9 infill units on existing social housing land. So this is rapid housing initiative funding. Construction has just recently started, I believe, on that project. And at 3 Cassidy Street, Anguanada is renovating the former St. Lawrence youth facility to create a 7-bedroom congregate living arrangement. That's going to be a transitional housing project intending to move their clients along to independence. So they'll be teaching them skills there and moving them on the housing continuum with the idea of allowing them to have greater independent living situations. So that's just a quick over the ongoing projects. So all those projects that I referenced have some level of council approval for funding support or development approval. We're working on other projects in the background as well that will come to the forefront for funding approvals in the future. So currently, we did a quick tally. There's about 250 units that have funding approval right now. And between the 3 levels of government, it's about $43 million that's been allocated amongst those approximate 250 units. So by far, this is the most active time for affordable housing that the city has had possibly ever. In terms of affordable housing programs, These are programs for individuals. So for homeowners and interested homeowners, there's the Kingston Frontenac Renovates program. And we've just released the 2022 program. So in the spring of each year is the Kingston Frontenac Renovates and the homeownership programs that are released. The Renovates program provides funding for accessibility repairs. So we've done ramps, doorway widenings, installations of accessible bathrooms, grab bars, those types of features, bathtubs. And then there's another stream of that program is for emergency repairs and energy retrofits. So often those are roof replacements or repairs, new furnaces, doors and windows, foundation work, those types of things. And the idea there is that funding is provided, a relatively small amount of funding is provided to maintain the home in a habitable condition so that it's not condemned or that the homeowner is required to move out where they'd be taking up rental housing. So it's keeping people where they are with a small bit of funding to fix up the home for emergency type repairs. And the homeownership program, that's another one that's released in the spring. So again, right now there's advertising. You'll see it on Facebook and other social media, and you'll see it in the newspaper as well. And this provides down payment assistance to renter households that are interested in becoming a homeowner, but they can't save the funding for the down payment. So it's people who can afford the monthly cost of homeownership, but aren't able to assemble a down payment. So this in the past has been a very popular program. The way we accept applications, we always set a date, and this year it's March 14th, and it's a first come, first serve. So as applications are determined complete, we are actually prioritizing them by chronological order as they come in. And that's always the way we work. And unfortunately, with the price escalation that's happened in the real estate market over the past couple of years, last year, we only had 2 successful applicants because of the prices were just too high. This year, we increased the maximum purchase price to $440,000, and we increased the household income. So by increasing the purchase price, the 10% down payment would be $44,000. Looking at what's available in the real estate market now, we're not fully comfortable that this year will be successful. There is ability to increase that higher, of course, within the limits that were allowed. But as we increase higher, the actual amount to each household would go up, and therefore we end up helping fewer households. So it's a difficult balance we're trying to find with this program. Some service managers have canceled this program in recent years because of the challenge that we're finding with prices are just too high. So this year's a real test for us to see if this is going to work, and we're of course monitoring it, and we'll look to tweak it as need be. But with prices now in the 600,000s for a single detached, it's really becoming difficult for this program to work for households. The second residential unit grant program provides up to $15,000 to support the creation of a secondary suite, so a basement apartment, or it could be a detached suite, or tiny home in your backyard, something like that. In 2001, there was 98 secondary suites built. So that's, 98 units, that's like a decent sized apartment building. So in terms of adding to the city's housing stock, the 98 units it's an appreciable amount of housing that's being provided. With the secondary suites program, we find uptake on that program is low as well. We're looking at ways to increase uptake, but the cumulative impact of the various criteria of the program end up screening people out. The $15,000 that's provided, they have to provide the unit for 5 years at affordable rates. And what we find is if you do the math on that, someone will quickly find that they're losing more than $15,000 on rent over 5 years, and they'd be encumbered with an agreement. So once we had a fair number of calls, but once we talk through the challenges, people often decide to go at their own. And yeah, that's that's an overview of the programs and projects that we have ongoing right now. And happy to answer any questions that the committee or public has about those.
Thank you very much to Joanne, Nicola, and John. So I will ask our committee members to start if there are any questions from our committee members regarding anything that you read in the report or from their overview today. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I always find it helpful when you guys go over them, even though we read the reports. I'm just wondering, and I'm not sure if one of the three of you could answer this now, but I'm just wondering what the difference is and what the kind of variation is between the money lost through federal and provincial step down and funding reductions on the one hand, and having successful funding applications for new projects. To me, it really feels like a robbing Peter to pay Paul. And are we actually ahead? Are we getting more money? Because of course the need has increased, and what's the reality? Are the other levels of government helping more or less?
Been there. Actually, maybe Nicola, we're having a little chat here. Maybe Nicola will have some information to share.
Hi, thank you for that question. And through you, Madam Chair. That is a great question, and it is concerning, and it is something that is being discussed a lot around all service managers. So we're hopeful that there will be more money, but right now we're kind of in the dark as much as you are, and who knows with the election and what is coming. But at this point in time, we understand that there is a need, and we're all really hoping that something's going to come forward.
Yeah, I'd be interested in those numbers, actually, how they compare what's getting lost on the one side compared to what's getting gained on the other, and what that actually looks like. And I just want to say that the this discharge, like all the new, okay, what is it? The hold on, got lots of notes here. The actually, just maybe somebody else could ask some questions. I'll just get my notes together. Thanks.
Ms. White, I see your hand.
Good afternoon, through you. I'm looking at the second residential unit affordability, so it's probably John. With the inflation, obviously, of the housing, so people can't afford, as we all know, isn't there a way that this grant program can be increased on the fund side and decreased on the yearly side, so that people who actually have, the capacity to maybe get a little bit of an income coming in that way, and also helps with the renting side for people? Would that be possible, if that makes sense? Just to increase one, decrease the other, but allow more people to be able to access the renovation side.
Sorry, and just to confirm, so I'm hearing their suggestion to increase the funding amount, and I wasn't understanding on the decrease side.
Well, you said that each applicant can get up to 15,000, but they have to rent for at least 5 years. And then obviously, you know, the calculations is that it's not beneficial. It's not going to work. So can't the program be increased in dollars so that people can make the renovations, but decreased in how long they're going to be committed and have that flexibility, so that way more households would probably be interested in renovating, you know, like say a portion of the home or whatever, to allow for maybe even their own families to be able to rent, because it's getting too expensive on all levels for renting as well as buying.
That would be the trick, is to adjust the numbers so that the math makes sense. And the adjustments would be, like you say, is potentially increasing the grant amount or allowing landlords to rent for more, or possibly a combination of the two.
Yeah, like a combination of the two would be ideal, which might open it up for more people to be able to do this, and, you know, help with the renting situation, as well as making a small earning as well.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. We've talked to other service manager areas that also have had this difficulty with the program. One of the challenges is, once you enter into an agreement with the municipality, you're encumbered by certain requirements. And what, in our discussions with other jurisdictions, homeowners don't want to be limited to who they can rent to, the amount of rent they can rent it for, and other requirements that might go along with it. To create a secondary suite, homeowners, if they don't have the cash available, they can take out a second mortgage, refinance against their home, and then they don't have to have limitations on your tenant has to have income below X, and you have to rent it in this arrangement for a certain number of years. So it's difficult. The numbers are a challenge, but there's also homeowners want to maintain flexibility. And once you enter into an agreement, you lose a lot of flexibility. And when that's your own home, it can become difficult. But we have an interest to try to make this program work for people. So one of the items on our work plan this year is to look at the parameters of the program and come back likely through this avenue to make adjustments to the program.
I'll just note my hand up just so that I can quickly address that as well, because Andy, thank you so much for mentioning that. I will say, as John was presenting, some of these programs that are, they're geared towards those who we might not think as often as much at the forefront of our mind, are those who are housed, but we are hearing, more and more that is, it's getting scary for those who are housed, who are starting to not be able to afford their rents, and those who are looking to be able to have homeownership with some sense of security. So those programs are really important. And I do think, especially for the secondary suites, is the goal trying to make sure that we have secondary suites that are under market rents, or I'm sorry, I don't remember the actual term for that, but that are offered under regular market rents? Or is the goal to make sure that we have more housing, like more of these secondary suites? Because I think that might help. I think that's maybe what Andy was trying to get to, is we need more of them. We need more opportunities for that. They are, these secondary suites usually at a lower rent than renting out a full property. So yeah, so trying to determine the right goal there, but yeah, I mean, especially the programs geared towards trying to help people with down payments and that type of thing. It's critical. I mean, there's those that we're not talking about as much, but it's coming up all the time. I mean, through my other volunteer organizations that I'm involved with, it's a real challenge that is facing many people right now, and they're well employed and they've always had secure housing, and they're starting now to either be evicted or unable to continue on with the rents that they've known. So. I didn't really have a question in that. Sorry, more comments relating to it, but that it is an important it's an important discussion, and thank you both for your commentary on that. I believe I saw your hand as well, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Just a quick question, and I believe this in part maybe for John. Like a lot of people, I kind of cringe when I hear the word affordable housing. Is it still defined as 80% of the CMHC average rent? Is that how we define it, or is that how the government defines it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor Neal. Affordable housing is very difficult to define. Some people think of it as rent geared to income housing. Some people think as below market housing. For our programs, of course, we have to differentiate and we have to have some sort of measure. So 80% is the level where you will be funded by government, typically. Until that was always the case. The municipal programs, provincial programs set 80% of average market rent. So you're 20% below average market rent. That was where you could get funding. In terms of definitions for affordable housing related to land use planning, in the PPS, the provincial policy statement, and the city's official plan, it's 100% of average market rent. So if you're at the average market rent, that's what those documents would say are affordable housing. For the large majority of people that are interested in affordable housing, when they look at those numbers, it's not affordable for somebody on fixed income. It's possibly not affordable for somebody making minimum wage. If you look at the National Housing Strategy, there's been a critique recently released on it that discusses this challenge, that a lot of the programs that are available don't create the deep level of affordability that there's a lot of people looking for right now. So that's certainly something that is not lost on us. And when the National Housing Strategy came out, if you dug into the language, a lot of it was about affordable housing for working Canadians or middle-income Canadians. It didn't say anything about affordable housing for people on social assistance. That wasn't ever part of the language in the National Housing Strategy, but I think that was the expectation of the public. And certainly us at the municipal level were interested in that. But once we came to see the programs being implemented, we realized that it wasn't providing the kind of funding to get down to where your rents are in the $500-600 neighborhood, where you probably need it to be affordable for very low income households, of which there are a number of.
I appreciate that. Because in Kingston, of course, with our very low vacancy rate and our ever growing rental rates, we're talking $960 qualifies as 80% of the average CMHC rent. And that's not very affordable for a lot of people in Kingston. So it's kind of, and I appreciate that you struggle with finding a working definition for what's affordable, but it is difficult, to say the least, to call $960 affordable. It's affordable for most, but not affordable for many. So, thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions or comments from our committee before I reach out to the public? Okay, thank you. Ms. Fawcett, can you let us know if we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I do see a hand already, so I'll just ask Candace Christmas if she'd like to address the committee at this time.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking, I have two questions. The first one actually is just relating to the program, the the program we were just discussing about secondary suites, and I wondered, once a landlord or homeowner engages in this program, which I understand they're being provided $15,000 with, is there any follow-up in terms of who's actually renting the facility? Because it would seem we have a blossoming of Airbnbs and so on, and I guess I would be very concerned that if some of our more needy citizens weren't actually being, or in any way that this is being monitored in terms of who's actually renting.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So as part of the requirements to receive the funding, so to actually get your check from the city, the homeowner is required to submit a variety of documents. One is the occupancy permit, which comes from the building department. Another document that's important is the notice of assessment from the tenant household. So we actually see the tenant household's notice of assessment to confirm what the income is. And going forward, annually, we receive annual occupancy report from the homeowner where they're attesting that they're renting the home in compliance with the requirements. That being said, there's a bit of a natural effect in there that someone who's renting a basement apartment probably isn't making $100,000 a year. So some programs that have been successful in the country have very low restrictions, and they'll say, you create a suite, we'll give you $5,000, because they know that a secondary suite typically rents for 20% below what the average would be. So a one-bedroom apartment in an apartment building, you'd expect a basement apartment to rent for about 20% below. And typically, someone who's renting a basement apartment is probably going to be someone that it matches their income. There'd likely be few situations where somebody renting a basement apartment has a more substantial income.
Thanks. And my other question was related to the encampment protocol working group. So I do a lot of work with the Integrated Care Hub, and I was the researcher and chief author on their needs assessment. And going back to history, one of the massive learnings that came out of Bell Park was that it wasn't just a question of homelessness, and I think a lot of people drew the line to reduce capacity within the emergency shelter system. But it was also a community that was able to protect itself from the drug poisoning crisis. And so I wonder to what degree that, the current, what we've called the shadow epidemic of drug poisoning is being factored into the risks associated with potential encampments, especially considering the Integrated Care Hub. As I understand, the evaluation won't even be ready until March 22nd when it goes to council, and there is no confirmation from you of Ministry of Health funding, and the Integrated Care Hub is slated to close otherwise March 31st. So one of the things about the Integrated Care Hub is that it is actually very much a shelter dedicated to preventing drug poisoning. And so I wonder how this thinking has come into the encampment protocol working group as they factor in the potential closing of the Integrated Care Hub, but also that the drug poisoning crisis isn't going to go away anytime soon without safe supply.
Thank you for that. That's a great question, Ms. Christmas, and through you, Madam Chair. The Encampment Working Group has been taking into consideration a number of factors over the last few months, and we have been working quite closely with and have had public help on our calls. The group is acutely aware of the drug poisoning crisis that many of our residents in the community are facing. And so we are taking recommendations and we'll be coming back to council with recommendations around the encampment protocol, I would suggest likely in Q2 as well, because of course it is of concern both to the city and to the service providers working with those individuals and the street outreach teams that are assisting them and trying to provide as much support as possible. So yes, we are very aware of this drug poisoning crisis, the impacts it's having, and we're working closely with public health on that, and we'll bring recommendations back to address that.
Thank you. Ms. Christmas, I see your hand is raised again.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I was trying to lower it, actually. There we go. Okay, there we go. I always get it backwards. My apologies.
No problem. And did that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. This is a question, I guess, for the clerks department, but the Homelessness Collective is really interesting, and we just got a little bit of like an overview of some of the action items, the 4 action items that they're working on. With the way we're moving forward with our new, we now have a meeting designated to hear more from groups, and I just wonder at what meeting will we be hearing from other groups, and will we be hearing more details about the Homelessness Collective and the 4 action items, and also to see how the community can get more involved, because to deal with stigma, we really need a lot of community involvement, and perhaps the Homelessness Committee could be part of that as well.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Boris, if you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty, and through you, Madam Chair. That's exactly what I do believe is going to happen, Councillor Doherty. The recommendations are just that they were literally just created a couple of weeks ago, and so those committees are starting to work on them. The smaller committees of the collective are beginning to work on them. The United Way also has a really great webpage dedicated to this initiative, which I will ensure that I forward to the clerk and that she can forward along to all of you. That should provide you with a lot more information as well regarding who's involved at that table, what the current nature of the work being done is, and contacts for information sharing. And Elizabeth may know more as well now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the link was in the report, so that is good. But it would still be good for the community to actually hear a presentation. So thanks for that.
Madam Chair, through you, there is still another hand from a member of the public. If we may move on to them. Joan Bowie would be the next to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to this committee. I have checked, well, I've watched some of these proceedings previously, and I commend you on all the hard work you do. I live in Williamsville, and as you know, we are flourishing with new apartments. We also now have an encampment at the Memorial Center. I do have a couple of questions regarding today's report. The first one is a follow-up on what Andy White was asking about. To some extent, of the 98 secondary suites that were built in the city under the secondary suite program, I'm wondering if any qualified for your grant, because I would point out to members of this committee that in general, secondary suites are the not affordable, because where I live, somebody takes a house with a regular lot and that has 6 bedrooms in it, and they add a secondary suite in the backyard that has 6 more bedrooms, and they're rented for $800 to $900 a month. So that's the other side of the secondary suite story. I agree with what Mr. Henderson has said. That's definitely at least a couple of apartment buildings worth of secondary suites have been built, but I just want it, they are not in the present form that are occurring for student housing at all affordable. So I have that question for Mr. Henderson. I don't know if I have a second question. So what happens? So my second question is sort of a broader question. I attended the One Roof program when the home base described the project that they were having. They had an open house and I went to that. And I have followed up and read some of the United Way report, and I'm trying to figure out for myself what home base does, what Anguinata does, what the Kingston Youth Center housing does. So I sort of am wondering if there's sort of three streams of housing for youth, unhoused youth, and I just don't know how that all comes together and where are those youth now? Thank you. Those are my two questions.
Through you, Madam Chair, secondary suite question and might be able to help with the second one. So none of the secondary suites in the student area would have received a grant. One of the requirements of the program, which is one of the ones that results in low uptake, is that the primary dwelling unit must be occupied by the homeowner. So very few situations in the student area would meet that criteria. None of the ones that were of the 98, none of those were funded. I believe we only have one project on the bill right now. The majority of the ones we end up funding are situations where you have a dependent parent, so like a grandparent, like the whole idea of the granny suite. The other one we've seen often is dependent child. So a child on ODSP, we've had a few of those, and they've parent creating a suite in the home to create privacy and some independence for the adult child and for the parent themselves. So yeah, so the city's money is not going to help out landlords in the student area, certainly. And for the second question, I'll let Joanna jump in on the question of youth program.
Thanks, John, and through you, Madam Chair. So I think if I'm hearing correctly, Ms. Bowie, you were wondering about the housing continuum with respect to sort of adults, home-based housing, Anguinata, and the Kingston Youth Shelter. So the Kingston Youth Shelter is an emergency shelter that is run by Kingston Youth Services, and they are an emergency shelter with housing first and prevention diversion supports for youth. They also have some transitional housing available for youth where they can actually reside within their own unit for up to a year, less a day, as staff work on trying to assist them in integrating into the community into safe and affordable permanent housing. Home-based housing also has some youth programming associated with their work. From the Cold is home-based housing's adult shelter, and that is for individuals aged 25 and older. So youth, for the purposes of emergency shelter and transitional housing, are from 16 to 24. So past that age, they would go to an adult shelter, but home-based housing does have youth services as well. So they do have One Roof, and they do have transitional housing for youth as well that is very similar to the transitional housing provided by Kingston Youth Shelter. So it can get a little confusing in some instances, but the great news is that it means more transitional housing for youth. Their proposal is to actually add to that stock. This summer, we saw a large increase in youth who were facing homelessness. And so this would be a much needed number of housing for specifically youth within the community where they would be safe, stable, and able to work towards their goal of finding housing. Anguinata, their organization actually is funded through the Ministry of Community and Social Services, and their mandate is to work with individuals with developmental delays. And so the bulk of the housing that you are going to be seeing them building and being able to assist clients with will be for that demographic of clientele. So individuals with developmental delays or comorbid challenges that they're dealing with. So I hope that that helps make a little bit more sense of it all. Some organizations have multiple types of programming, but there really is, from those three organizations, the three main streams being youth shelter, youth transitional housing, and Anguanada being developmental services. Thank you.
Did that cover off the questions well enough? Oh, I don't think she's with us anymore. Okay.
Madam Chair, I did see Ms. Bowie's hand go back up. If you'd permit her to just follow up quickly.
Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that. It has been a bit of a mystery to me. I wondered about Anguanada. I have a background in nursing, so I kind of thought maybe that was the case. I still am a bit confused about the Kingston Youth, what the city provides and what Home Base provides. And do you have any numbers for the number of youth now that are requiring housing? And where are the people right now that would potentially be living at 484 Princess? Where are they, in a separate unit somewhere? And how many youth between the two projects, which seem to maybe run together a bit with age and so on and so forth, how many youth are there today in the city that require this? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and through you, Madam Chair. So the city doesn't provide youth programming itself. So we are the service manager, and through our homeless funding, we provide supports to both home-based housing and Kingston Youth Shelter for the services that they do provide. So with that being said, there are currently youth who are in transitional housing, and we probably have between 20 and 30 youth that are living in transitional housing at this point in time, either between Kingston Youth Shelter and home-based housing, as they look for permanent housing. We also currently have 44 youth on our by name list. And our by name list is a real-time tracker of individuals who identify as being homeless within the city of Kingston, County of Frontenac. So in total, we know of 44 youth who are homeless, so under the age of 24. If they're staying in emergency shelter, they would be at the Kingston Youth Shelter right now, because that is the only organization within the city that provides an emergency shelter for youth. Right now, we know that they have 6 youth that are staying with them. Any youth that might not be accounted for within the system, so not staying in transitional housing or not staying in an emergency shelter right now, the likelihood is that those individuals may be somewhat fluid. We do know that there's a lot of youth that do couch surf, or maybe staying sometimes with their friends, family members, or with their own family members. It may be due to a breakdown in family relations, so they have other individuals that they may be able to stay with for a short term. We know that youth are particularly vulnerable when they are homeless, especially young women, because there's a lot associated with actually accessing space to live and to eat and to be taken care of as a young woman within the community. So the services that we provide through the 2 agencies that provide those services are aware and working really diligently to try and make sure that the youth that require emergency shelter and support are able to do so. If they're not able to access the shelter and are completely homeless, if they are safe to stay in a motel and be supported by the organization, in some instances that occurs. In some instances, prevention and diversion staff will help youth find other locations to be as they're waiting for an emergency shelter bed to become available. I think that there's definitely a need for more youth supports within the community, and so that's what all of these organizations are coming together to try and resolve. do hope that helps a little clearer, but where each youth spends each night can be somewhat fluid if they're not already in transition or in the shelter itself.
Thank you, Joanne. Ms. Fawcett, do we have anyone else from the public present who would like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, there were only 2 members of the public present, so we have completed that section.
Okay, perfect. And was there anyone else from our committee who wanted to speak? Excellent. So we will move forward then. That report was for information purposes only. I want to thank everybody. Thank you for the presentations from our city staff. Thank you for the questions from the public as well as from our committee members. Really appreciate it. So we'll move forward. Item 8 on the agenda is motions. There are no motions. Number 9 is notices of motion. Again, we have none. Number 10 was other business. We do not have any other business that was noted during the agenda. Number 11, correspondence. We have none. And number 12 is the date of our next meeting. So the next meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee is scheduled on Thursday, May 12th at 1 p.m. And then following that, we have adjournment. If I could have a first, please, to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. And I think I saw Michelle McCarty's hand go up second. And then all in favor, please, show of hands. Thank you so much. Meeting is adjourned. Bye-bye. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for your time.